Good morning. We're going to ask you to take your seats because we have a lot to get to today. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for everyone in the room and people who are online. My name is Peggy Bird. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Boston Globe Media Partners. I'm so honored to welcome you to this year's Globe Summit, the 4th edition of our award-winning annual Ideas Festival. Globe Summit has become a renowned meeting place and forum for leaders across multiple sectors to exchange ideas and meaningful discourse on some of the most pressing issues we face together. The theme of this year's summit is Boston's Breakthrough. A little exciting and slightly provocative, but what exactly does that mean? Well, Greater Boston is home to visionary leaders, industry trailblazers, and award-winning journalists who are solving challenges and facilitating conversations to confront key issues that are impacting people's lives locally and around the world. Now is the perfect and critical moment to take a look at Boston's role in impacting, breaking through, and not shrinking from the hard work of health equity, climate change, food sustainability, employment, workforce development, and so much more. At Boston Globe Media, we are compelled and committed to doing our part by creating forums for these really important conversations that align with our mission and values to deliver high-quality journalism that serves the community and influences and shapes our future. So for the next few days, journalists from our portfolio of brand, we have several, the Boston Globe, Boston.com, and Stat will convene fireside chats, panel discussions with a treasure trove of guest speakers, including Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, former Director of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, journalist and weathercaster Al Roker, and many more. We are so proud to connect and collaborate with such a dynamic and distinguished roster of individuals who've agreed to spend time with us to discuss and consider breakthrough innovation, ideas, and positive change. In addition to our amazing speakers, the summit would not be possible without our partners. So I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Eversource, and to all of our supporting partners, including Mass General Brigham, Sanofi, PNC Bank, JP Morgan Chase, Cross Insurance, and UMass Boston. So I'm excited to kick things off by introducing our moderator for today's opening session, Shirley Leung, who is a business columnist, an associate editor at The Globe, and host of Globe Opinion podcast, Say More. You must listen to it, it's outstanding. She's joined in conversation by Jim Dow, editorial page editor of the Boston Globe, and a 30-year veteran of the New York Times. Thank you both for being here. Shirley, I'll turn things over to you to get started. Enjoy your day, everyone, and let's break through. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Good morning. So this is very exciting. I have a few questions, but I believe if you are joining us online, you can also offer up some questions. If you're here at the Harvard Club, I think you have QR codes, so you can also toss in some questions. So Jim, good morning.
Morning.
So you spent most of your career at the New York Times. You were the State House Bureau Chief in Albany, and you were in the Washington Bureau. You were the Metro editor at one point, and this is all on the news side of the Times. But you really like being on the opinion side of a news organization. So what can you accomplish on the editorial page that you can't on the news side?
Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us. It's really an honor to be here. So I'll just start by saying I love being on the news side, too. I didn't leave it because I didn't like it. It was great. But opinion journalism, if any of you read our pages, hopefully you'll have gleaned this from reading them, just sort of bring another dimension to journalism. And I think having been in news and opinion is a great experience because in news you learn, you're all about trying to get facts, report them as straight and fair as you can without commentary. And opinion, I think, is really important to a full package of news coverage in that it provides a way to help people think about the news. And I did have, for a period at the Times, I was the op-ed editor there before I came to the Globe. And we had a sort of a motto, which was that we weren't there to tell you what to think. We were there to try to help you figure out what you think and why you think what you think and how to even defend how you think what you think. And so that's the great thing about opinion journalism to me. You should read the news first. That's why in the newspaper, the opinion section is later in the A book. But read the opinion section too to help you think about what it is you just gleaned from the news side. And so that to me is what opinion journalism is about.
Yeah, a lot of us started on the news side, and I've come to the opinion side as a columnist, and I actually do like it a lot. You know, I didn't realize that, but I love sharing my opinion. I like telling people what to think.
Yeah, well, just to add to that is I think people have this view that opinion journalism is you just say what you think. and there are some opinion journalists who do that, but I think what we've tried to cultivate, or I've tried to cultivate in our excellent team, is the idea that opinion journalism is also reported. You talk to people, you look at documents, you read, you evaluate facts, and then you can comment on it. And that's the additional aspect of it.
So you've been in your role at the Globe for about 2 years now. So how do you define success on the editorial page? I mean, is it buzzy op-eds? Is it making sure you have a range of opinions? What is it?
Well, yes. Buzzy is usually good in our business. Sometimes it brings you more pain than you like. But I think what we think about success in a few ways. One is we want to have impact. And what do we mean by impact? If we're writing editorials, advocating a piece of legislation that we feel strongly about, we're hoping people on Beacon Hill, or sometimes Washington, are paying attention and thinking about what we said. Doesn't mean that they'll do what we said, but at least if they're incorporating our arguments into their thinking, then we will have felt that we've at least brought something to the table. But we also, most of our stuff really isn't about government or what's happening on Beacon Hill or Washington. It's really about life, society, culture, institutions, mostly in the greater Boston, New England region, but also nationally. And we're hoping that we stimulate conversations, you know. Sometimes that means we're going to publish things that provoke people and make them angry. But if that's getting them to think or to have dialogues with other people or to interact with ideas that they're not comfortable with, I consider that a success, even if it brings a fair amount of hate mail as a result.
So you've been a real champion of the Globe's podcast, Say More, which I'm the host of. And I know this is a shameless plug. New episodes drop every Thursday, by the way. So listen wherever you find your podcasts. But seriously, that's how I've gotten to know Jim through the podcast. We, came together and almost like a coming of the minds. And we actually, I was just remembering this. I was a huge fan of Kara Swisher's Sway podcast when it was at the New York Times, and so are you. And so, and we talked about creating almost like a Kara Swisher Sway type podcast with Say More. And so Say More is housed in Globe Opinion. Jim is very instrumental in putting together every episode. You help shape each episode. So why is audio such a priority for you?
So I just love podcasts, so that's part of it. But I think, and this is actually gets to a broader issue that I wanted to just touch on too, but podcasting to me is just a fantastic form for opinion journalism because for a variety of reasons. One is, it's really hard to get people to write. You know, it's really there's people that are brilliant and they're incredible experts, and you want them to write about a certain issue, and it takes 3 months for them to deliver you something and then 4 months to edit it. It's always, some people are great at it. I don't mean to say that everybody isn't, but many people aren't. But get those people in a room and put a mic in front of them and talk to them for 40 minutes, and they're great. And that's the wonderful thing about podcasting. You can draw out another side of people's personalities and skills. And podcasting is also just warmer. It's like it's personal. You hear the voice. You get a sense of the person behind the brain and the thinking. And the bigger point I wanted to make is that I have this title, Editorial Page Editor, which is a really old-fashioned title. It's all about the editorial page and the editorials, but that's just a small part of what I do. Opinion is like podcast, it's like TikTok videos and Instagram, it's columns, it's op-eds by outside writers, it's letters, which are hugely important to what we do. It's the comments section. And all of these different forms, just as for the news side, reach different kinds of people. It's not all the same audience. Young people are drawn to podcasting and short videos. We should be reaching out to those folks because they're not reading newspapers, sad to say. But we can inform them, we can stimulate debate among them through these new forms. And to me, podcasting is a crucial part of that.
So the news cycle seems like it's on overdrive, like all the time.
Yeah.
And so how do you strike the right balance between covering local issues and national topics?
Right, yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that the news side wrestles with too, I think. And I think a lot about this partly because coming from the New York Times, where I spent almost my entire journalism career, the Times is not just a national paper, it's a global paper. It's got more people overseas than it does in the United States now, I believe. I'm just making it up, but I think that's true. And its reach is just unbelievable. And then the Globe, which is really one of the great news institutions in America, I hope everybody appreciates that. I always felt that way at the New York Times. But its reach is obviously not the same, but it's vitally important to New England, and it is the biggest newspaper north of the New York area, and so for us at the Globe, there's always this interesting tension between how much do we write about national things or international things, and New England, Massachusetts are hyper-local, Newton, Brookline, neighborhoods of Boston, whatever. And I've come down to the view that really we have to be strong locally if we're going to be a meaningful paper into the future, because you can always look to the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal for all that national global news. You should have some of it in the Globe, but those places are not going to cover what's happening in this region, and we can, and that to me is really vital to us. So all our writers, and I'm like this too, we want to write about the presidential campaign, we want to write about what's happening in the Middle East, and we should do some of that, but we really have to be paying attention to the school committees and to the city councils and to what they're doing on Beacon Hill, and also to some degree what they're doing in Providence and Maine and New Hampshire too, because those are part of our readership. So we're always pulling back to our really key responsibility as being a regional paper.
So do you have a favorite local issue to weigh in on? I'm thinking about the brouhaha over bike lanes, something like that. We seem obsessed.
Yeah. Do I seem obsessed?
No, the city seems obsessed.
Yeah, well,
Maybe you too.
I'm obsessed because I'm a huge cyclist, and so I don't mind admitting that I think bike lanes are really, really important, and I know that all you people who drove here are probably hating on me right now, but that's an important dialogue actually. Weirdly, really important in local races, I'm finding. I actually think that bike lanes are going to be, they were a big issue in Cambridge last year in the city council race. It's going to be a big issue in Boston, I think. And there's a fair debate to have there, and that's actually a great example of where we can provoke people to think outside their own boxes. So bike lanes are definitely good, but schools, we're writing about Boston schools now. We think schools are just a huge issue for Massachusetts. The state has such a great national reputation for its excellent education, and it remains that way, but we all also know that there's been terrible learning loss during COVID. The struggle to get students back on track is huge, and that's that type of thing is where we can really play an important role on local news, I think.
So we're getting some good questions from the audience, so keep them coming.
Okay.
So I'm going to toss in the first one. This is a really good one. Do you feel you are able to actually sway opinions? People seem so settled in their thoughts and ways these days.
Yeah. This has always been an issue, I think, for opinion editors. And I remember back at the Times, we always used to wonder, like, whether we ever swayed anybody. And like the best op-ed you could think of, or letter, would be, I changed my mind, here's why, right? And that just almost never happens. Or if it happens, people don't want to admit it, or whatever. It's hard to explain even if you do change your mind. And sometimes you change your mind over many, many months, and you don't even realize you've changed your mind.
So how do you keep on going on if you know that's the case?
I think I come back to the idea that I don't really expect that we change minds, to be honest with you. I think sometimes we do, and I think sometimes when we write pieces, I urge writers, and I think to myself that you're trying to think about that person who's wrestling with an issue, like they're kind of on the fence, and you may, whatever you write, they may hate and therefore take the opposite position of you, or they may love it and they take your position. But either way, in reading you, they've crystallized their own thoughts, right? So I think that's the best we can do by and large. Yeah.
One more question from the audience. So of the various platforms and channels for sharing news and opinions, which one is your favorite and why? And which one is the most important going into the future? These are good questions. We got smart listeners and readers.
Yeah, which are the best platforms for sharing news and opinion? I don't know. I don't actually think we know, to tell you the truth. It's obviously like the phone is really huge, right? So we've had to rethink from paper to desktop to laptop to phone. And so I do think that is where probably for the foreseeable future, that's where the majority of our readers are getting their news. And so we have to figure out how to optimize on the phone. So people can see it easily and read things clearly, and yeah. So I think that's probably it.
So let's talk about the 2024 presidential race. What's your strategy for coverage?
Well, so we have a very small team, so it's not like we can blanket cover this gigantic election. But I think I'm trying to optimize our different points of view that we provide on the opinion section. So we have Jeff Jacoby, who's a conservative, and he will write. But he's also very critical of former President Trump. So he will criticize Trump, but he's also very critical of Harris. So he brings a certain point of view. We have much more liberal writers who, like Kim Atkins Storr, who's writing a big series about Trump and what she thinks about his national security positions, and also his shortcomings in terms of national security issues. And then in the past year, I've hired a young conservative writer named Karine Hajar, whose job it is I feel during this election is to go and talk to Trump Republican voters, to help people understand where are they coming from? Why do they support Trump? What is it about this man that he's been such a dominant factor in American politics now for a decade, and having lost in 2020 could very easily win in 2024. What is happening there? Why do people like him? And she speaks well to those voters, and so that's what she's going to be doing.
And you're still doing endorsements, right?
We're still doing endorsements, yes. You know, a lot of papers have given up on endorsements. Even the New York Times is sort of, I think, on its way to abandoning endorsements. And I personally feel endorsements are really an important role for any news organization, or at least a newspaper that's with a long tradition to play, because I do think people do care. Even if they're going to disagree with you, they kind of care what your argument for a ballot question or a candidate is. And again, the idea of helping people figure out where they themselves are on an issue is a key part of an endorsement. And so we will be endorsing in all the ballot questions in Massachusetts, some of the races. There's not a lot of them in Massachusetts this year. And then obviously in the presidential as well. Not that it's going to be any surprise who we endorse. So,
so you moved to Boston for this job, and you love Bostonians, right? I mean, we're better than New Yorkers, right? And are you rooting for more importantly, are you rooting for the Red Sox yet? I think I saw a Red Sox cap in your office yesterday.
You did. I did hide it well enough, I guess. No. This is like the most tricky question you could ask in front of a Boston crowd. I will say, first of all, I'm not a very good fan. I'm not the only team I've ever remained loyal to, because I moved around a fair amount in my life, is the Buffalo Bills, because I'm from Buffalo. Sorry, Patriots fans. I remain a Buffalo Bills fan. But I will say that as a kid growing up in Buffalo, we always felt a chip on our shoulder about New York City, because we were the little upstate second city of New York, and we thought that they were snobs and they looked down at us. And so we automatically hated New York sports teams, and I gravitated to the Red Sox as a kid. So Carl Yastrzemski was my hero when I was growing up. Then I moved to New York for many years, and of course I started cheering for the Yankees, so what can you do? But I have to say it's easy to cheer for the Red Sox now. I will say if the Yankees...
I'm not sure everyone would agree with you with that right now, at this moment.
Yeah. Well, and also I would just say, like, if the Yankees make the World Series, I will quietly cheer for them.
So what surprised you the most about living in Boston so far?
I don't know if it's surprised me, but I think what has really delighted me about Boston, and there's two things, I guess. One is it's like the city really punches above its weight, so to speak. I mean, like I lived in New York for many years, as well as Washington and Albany, and there's so much to do in New York. It's an incredible city. I just love New York, but. Boston has a lot going on, and it's all in a very compact area. And so I just love the fact that I can live in the city. I'm lucky enough to be able to afford to live in the city. And I walk to everything, or bike. And that's an amazing thing. Like, even in New York, if you lived in Manhattan, you're still going to need to take the train to get a lot of things. You're going to have to fight traffic various places. In Boston, it's like you've got amazing universities, you've got Fenway, you've got the Symphony, you've got art galleries, you've got downtown offices where we're headquartered, and it's all right there. And it's just incredible. It's just an amazing walking city, and I don't think I quite grasped that until I moved here. It's been a delightful surprise.
So we're still getting questions from the audience.
Okay.
People are very interested in what you have to say, Jim. Okay. So we're going to do two questions in the last 4 minutes, all right? This is a good question, another good question. How are news consumers supposed to differentiate opinion journalism from the tidal wave of agitation and disinformation distributed under the guise of opinion?
That's a super tricky question, because when you talk about the media broadly, and you're talking about television and radio and newspapers and online platforms, and the problem with this massive content that bombards you every day is that it's not labeled in any way, right? Like, you know, people go on to cable news, and they're doing commentary, but it's not labeled commentary. It's just like they're doing it, right? And I think a lot of times newspapers get dinged for the sins of television, quite honestly. Sorry if there's anybody from TV here. But like, we work really hard to label things, and that's all I can say is, like, if you're looking at the Boston Globe, it'll say opinion on it, you know. It'll say column on it, or, you know, and if it doesn't say that, well, then it's coming out of the news side. And there's just everything, you know, other formats don't do that. And so, yes, it's super confusing that, you know, there's lots of stuff that is, you know, purports to be news coverage, and it's just people doing commentary. And there's not an easy answer to that.
I guess subscribe to the Globe, maybe?
Subscribe to the Globe, there you go.
More shameless plugs. All right, one last question. So insiders have had the ear of the editorial page and been able to publish ideas. What is your plan to make the page more egalitarian and bring in new voices?
Well, that's a good question, and a welcome question. I mean, the truth is we always want new voices, and the problem is like, you can't just go out and say, I'm looking for a new voice, you know, where's the new voice? New voices also have to, like, come to us, right? And so, you know, a lot of them, we commission pieces, we go out and look for people, experts, great writers to contribute, but if we don't know you, we can't commission you. So I encourage people to reach out to us. I will also say, well, two other things. One is that this is the function of letters. We encourage everybody to write letters if they can. And sometimes we have a great letters editor. He considers all the letters. And sometimes they're so well written and argued, we ask them to expand them into op-eds, you know, or we go back to that person because they clearly have, you know, clear, interesting thoughts. And I will also just say that we are constantly looking for new writers on the horizon, and also people who can do short video and that sort of thing as well, to be regular contributors to us. And so when we see somebody who's written something remarkable for us once, we may try to bring them into our sort of solar system and keep having them write again. And then that way we keep broadening the types of voices we have.
Well, Jim, this has been terrific. I think at this point we tell people, what is it? Subscribe to Say More. Subscribe to the Globe. You can. Where do you find this podcast? Where do we find Say More?
Wherever you find your podcast.
That's right, Apple, Spotify, and Jim even did a turn as a guest host last week, right?
Yeah.
Author Sebastian Junger. It was great. So don't go away. For those of you online, I'm moderating the next session that starts in about 5 minutes. It's called Building Boston's Black Wall Street. A quick reminder that Globe Summit sessions are being recorded and will be made available for viewing after the event. So for the full schedule, go to globe.com/summit. We've got a full day ahead. Jim, this is great. I guess I'll see you in the office, right?